Brick schools like Toms River and so many others across the state are being directly impacted by the S2 legislation or the school funding formula in a negative way. 200 districts are losing aid, 361 are getting aid, and in a formula that many perceive as unfair and others perceive as very fair. Brick is one of those schools losing a lot of money. I'm here with Acting Superintendent Sean Cranston and Business Administrator Jim Edwards to discuss how this funding formula has affected the Brick School District and how it will continue to do so. Let's start with how it's affected the staff, the students, the buildings so far. I know Herbertsville Elementary School, which is $1.8 million to run, could be on the chopping block here. So how have you seen this funding formula kind of affect the school district?
So I'm going to bring you back 2 years. For the 17-18 school year, we are set to lose $1.9 million. We looked at anywhere where we had any fat, which we didn't have too much fat. We ran our district pretty lean. We saw in special services that we had a little bit extra. We set to cut, I believe it was 23 teacher aides, and we cut a few teachers and a couple other spots during that school year. This didn't really affect the class sizes too much for the 17-18 school year. When we started prepping for the budget for the 18-19 or 19-20 school year, we saw that we were going to lose $2.4 million. So we decided to cut 5% across the board, and that 5% cut every building principal, every program manager was set to cut 5%. So this affected some schools more than others. Some of the bigger schools were able to cut less staff percentage-wise than some of the smaller schools. This really raised our class sizes. We had elementary schools that class sizes grew by 15-20%. So give you an example. One of our bigger elementary schools, Emma Havens Young, had about 6 teachers per class. If you drop 1 per grade, now we're going down to 5, their class size is raised by 20%. Some of our smaller schools or mid-sized schools have 4 teachers per grade. If they dropped 1, they went down to 3. Now you're raising the class size 33%. And so on. So the smaller schools even affected more by the class sizes. We have a couple schools that have 3 per grade. So if we went from 3 to 2, we're increasing class size 50%. So give an example that a school that was used to having class size of 20 jumped right up to class size of 30. There's multiple schools in the elementary classes that have over 30 kids in a class. When you walk in and you have a 4th and 5th grade classroom with over 30 kids, the kids are already out to the door. We know in the future how this is going to affect it. It's going to affect more of the high school and the middle school. Our issue right now is certification. So what I mean by that is our middle schools are in teams. So we can't just cut a teacher here or cut a teacher there. We had to fit certain certifications. You probably can remember back to middle school when you had a teacher specified for math, science, language arts, history. We have teaming, so we have a math science teacher and a language arts history. So if we need to cut, we almost need to cut like an even number so we can still have matching teams and matching certificates. So we don't really know what that is going to do with the class size in the middle school. And then high school, we have classes, like, give you an example, Algebra 1, where we're up to 26, 27 freshmen in the class. But then we also have classes, which is AP Calc, which we still have 6. So when you look at class size in high school, it's not as easy as just saying we have 30 in a class. We have specialized things. But we're going to look at some of those classes that have under 10, and we're not going to be able to run them next year, which is going to affect our high schools being able to offer many AP courses for the students. So
going off the middle school and high school part, would teachers have to sort of double up on what they teach outside of math and another subject?
So right now we're a little bit different than Toms River. In that case, we all our 6th grades teach 2 subjects. So when you go into 6th grade, you only have 2 teachers. You go to a math science teacher, and then you go to language arts history, so you see the same teacher twice. And we have that in 7th grade, but then in 8th grade they go to a model where they have 4 teachers. The teachers still have a certificate that they are able to use. So it's not as easy as saying, hey, we're overstaffed in this grouping. We need to be able to look at all their certificates and match who's non-tenured, who's teaching what subject, who's able to teach other subjects. So once it's not just elementary where we have 100 kids, 5 teachers, we know there's 20 per class. It's not as easy. We have to figure out the certificates and how many groupings of kids we can have. So,
how have you seen in trying to balance the budget since this formula came out and even into 2020 with the upcoming school year and trying to figure out where to trim some of the fat from the budget and how to make things work with the funding that was taken away?
It's extremely difficult, and there's difficult choices that have to be made. I don't like the word fat because being that we're one of the lowest spending school districts in the state, I don't think that we have fat. It's more of priorities. So things that in the past that we chose to fund, like AP courses and various extracurricular things, probably aren't going to be able to be funded in the future because the money's just not there to fund them. So in the 2021 school year, we're scheduled to lose $4.2 million in state aid. Our tax levy at a 2% cap only generates $2.1 million. So we're going to have a $2.1 million deficit in revenue. We're already, according to the state, $12 million below adequacy. I'm not sure if anyone's ever gotten to adequacy and how that all works, but the School Funding Reform Act that was passed in 2008 because of the Abbott decisions, it was deemed the constitutional formula, determined that there was a model school built, hypothetical school, which costs were assigned and then enrollment was assigned to, and that determined how much money a school district needed to spend in order to provide a thorough and efficient education, or another term that is used as adequate education. When you run that formula against brick schools, it shows that we're $12 million below adequacy. So we don't spend, according to the formula, what we should be spending on education, which is really where it starts getting, where you start thinking, well, this doesn't make any sense, because if we're not spending what we should be spending on education, then how is the department telling us via S2 that we need to lower our expenses by another $2.1 million going into the 2021 school year? Because that's only going to make us further away from adequacy. When you really take this out all of the years and you talk about the $24 million in total state aid that we're going to lose, and the fact that if we are going up 2%, which we have to by S2, we're mandated to increase by 2% each year. At the end of that, at the end, we're going to be $7 million less in revenue total because of tax levy increase versus state aid decrease. So we'll be $7 million less in revenue, which means we're going to be about $7 million less in expenditures, which at that point puts us $19 million below adequacy. I think, and I've said this at our board meetings, that at one point we have a similar situation or a similar case that the Abbotts did, that we're not providing the students a thorough and efficient education. We're not providing an adequate education. When that determination is going to be made, and we're currently in litigation with the Department of Education over the state aid formula. Our belief is that the formula, the way it's run, I would say on the left-hand side of the ledger, we don't disagree with the way costs are being assigned and how much the department is determining that it costs to educate a kid. We're arguing on the right side of the formula, which is then when they do the wealth calculations, how much they determine BRIC should be paying, what our local fair share is. There's calculations that are being used, and they apply them statewide to determine a community's ability to pay. It shows that BRIC, and like Tom's River, because I know you've spoke to them as well, it shows that we have a greater ability to pay than what we're currently paying on our local tax levy. We've asked for that information to say, okay, can you show us how you're arriving at that? And the answer we get is that it's proprietary, or it's confidential, or it's deliberative, and that we're not entitled to the information. And so when somebody tells you that, you sort of, it's hard to trust when they won't show you the devil in the details, right? So that's really been our big argument, is like, okay, if you truly think that we should be paying more, prove it. Show it to us. And when they won't show it to you, you really gets annoying.
The Senate President talked about recently how this is about bringing every school district to 100% funding instead of some districts that are overfunded, and then providing aid to districts that are underfunded. He pinpointed Toms River as being one of the districts overfunded. Do you see that as, have you had, and you can answer this too, any conversations with the Senate President about if he thinks that the Brick School District is one of those districts overfunded and that's why aid is being taken away?
That's what we've heard as well, is that we're one of those districts that is overfunded. So if you go back to when the funding formula was first implemented back in 2008, they told us at that time that we were one of those districts overfunded. we're told that over a 5-year period that aid would be taken away from us. It never was. It never was taken away. So, we're caught in a catch-22 because we continued receiving that state aid for all of those years, never had to make the reductions, and at the same time, if you remember back in 2012, we got hit with Superstorm Sandy. Our district lost $600 million in ratables. The community was devastated. People were rebuilding, and the Board of Education at that time decided not to raise taxes to try to help the community recover. People were already hurting because of the effects of the storm, and now to put a tax increase on them didn't seem like it was the right thing to do. So we held taxes flat for many years while people were trying to recover. In part because we were able to, because we had declining enrollment and we were still receiving state aid. So there was no real reason to raise taxes at that point. Hindsight's always 20/20. So now folks in Trenton can turn around and point and sit at districts like ours, and Toms River's in a similar situation because of the storm as well, and point at a district like ours and say, well, yeah, they never raised taxes. Well, yeah, there was a reason why we didn't raise taxes. And so that needs to be taken into consideration when now you're considering cutting this money from the district and asking the district to raise taxes at this point, mandating that we raise taxes at this point by 2% a year, when you know that we're a district that doesn't spend a lot of money. It's proven by the fact that we're so far below adequacy, and in the end we're going to be $7 million less in revenue and expenditures. So when you put all that together, the logical person would say that just doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up. Yes, the district doesn't have the ability to get to where it needs to be to meet its adequacy number. And the Department of Education and Trenton has not given us that opportunity. There is no ability. There's talks of, the Assembly and Senate both passed a bill that says you could raise your tax levy above 2% if you're one of those districts losing state aid. The governor has yet to sign it. From what I've heard, he's not going to sign it, or he says he won't sign it anyway. I don't know that that's the answer right now because, that would put a larger tax burden on our taxpayers who are still recovering. We're still $300 million below what our rateable base was pre-Sandy. So we still have, communities like ours have still not fully recovered. So now you're asking folks to pay more in taxes to support the schools at a time that they won't share us the formula that shows why we should. There was the post Superstorm Sandy, the year after, when we lose that amount of money in ratables, and you look at the value of equalized valuations on our funding formula sheet, you would assume that we would have gone down, that our community's value would be worth less. But yet what we got from the department was not that. It was that we were worth more, that the community's value has actually increased post Superstorm Sandy. So going back to that year, that's when I started asking questions, and I know Bill Doran from Toms River did as well because they had a similar situation. How did that happen? How does our equalized valuation number the year after Superstorm Sandy increase when we know the reality is the ratables decreased? Homes were destroyed. There was a tremendous amount of destruction. So anyone that's from this area fully understands that. I don't know that people that aren't from this area fully understand that.
Assemblyman Greg McGuckin introduced a bill, I believe it was about a month ago, looking for transparency in the school funding formula so that the per pupil cost and everything that's with the formula. Is that creating a lot of a challenge in trying to run the school district with a lot of uncertainty coming from Trenton?
I would say yes. Right now we have to run the district from what we have. We know the funding we're going to get. We know the funding that about the funding that we're going to get for next year. So we have to kind of plan accordingly. But we're also still pushing to get that formula released. So not only as the administrators, but the community and the board members understand why that's the case. What is going to happen? Once that formula is released, then we can at least understand. And if Murphy signs the bill, then our board at least has a reason to possibly raise taxes. But again, as Jim just said, raising taxes in this time is not something that we're looking to do. So there is uncertainty. We have teachers, we have staff members that are uncertain about their future, and that's hard. And they work every day very hard, and it's hard to not know your future, right? And even us, we don't really know what Brook's going to look like in a few years because of this. I don't think anybody really knows what brick's going to look like because of this. So.
How do you put together the plan, or when you're forced to make cuts with what has to be taken away, or what kind of layoffs you have to make to staff, or any programs, after-school programs, or certain classes or certain schools? When you have to make those cuts, how do you determine which gets cut first, and is there sort of a priority list?
So that's a great question. We actually have, it's going to be an estimate, about 18 to 20 budget meetings. We have a budget meeting for every single one of our schools, and we have a budget meeting for every single one of our departments: curriculum, superintendent, business office, transportation, facilities. So we have, it's upwards of 20 budget meetings. And before we do those budget meetings, each school has what we call a staffing meeting, and we go over our expected numbers for next year, the number of teachers we're expecting to have, and where they could possibly make cuts. And we already know, we started looking at those numbers now, and we already have class sizes in the 30. So there's some elementaries that really can't cut. And we know what we took from last year, so we have an idea of where we're going to go to, but we meet individually with each principal, and then we go into the budget meeting with each principal, and then we meet as a whole leadership team. So there's about 15 to 20 of us that meet, and that's how we discuss it. We know what we have to do. There is, when you ask to say a priority list, keeping kindergarten and first grade a little lower than keeping fourth and fifth grade was a priority last year. I don't know if we're going to be able to continue something like that. Keeping certain AP classes might not be a priority compared to keeping class sizes in the younger elementary lower. So yes, we do have some sort of priority list, but it is basically a 6-week process, or longer than that really, but the meat of it is like a 6-week process where we meet continually almost every day and discuss budget. Have
you worked or had conversations with Mayor John Ducey or the 10th District legislators, Senator Holzappel, Assemblyman McGuckin, and Catalano, in trying to broker some sort of meeting with the Senate President or anybody in Trenton to look for some transparency in the funding, or for answers with how to get the district going?
Yes, and I would also like to add to that all have been very supportive. The mayor's office and the council of Brick fully understands how this is going to impact the schools, and when it impacts the schools, how it's going to impact the community. So they are 100% behind us, trying to say this is not fair to Brick schools. The 10th legislative district has been tremendously supportive all through last year. They as you just mentioned, they've sponsored a bill that says release the formula, basically, and it's going back to that for a second. I know that bill hasn't gotten a lot of traction right now, which I'm shocked over, because it's a bill that you would think every community in the state and every legislator in the state would support. It's a bill that says make the way you distribute $6.2 billion of taxpayer money transparent. It's to me that's so. Not to go off on a tangent on that, but that's really hard for me to believe that has not gotten the support. In fact, right now it's not even made it out of committee, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But the 10th legislative district has been very supportive. They've had set up meetings for us that they've attended with Senator Sweeney. We've met with him last year to discuss these issues. When we met with Senator Sweeney last year, he was sympathetic to our situation. Fully understood that this is a problem for districts like Toms River, Brick, and others that are going to lose more money in state aid than they have the ability to generate in local tax levy. And he also, gave us the indication that he didn't believe that districts like ours, who've been suffering from Superstorm Sandy still, should have to increase local property taxes. But there's never really, we're not getting a real answer on how we should do things differently. We heard from him that he understands that we're a low-spending district and that we're below adequacy, and that adequacy means you're not providing thorough and efficient education. So we hear all these things as if he doesn't disagree with us, but we're not hearing that what the solution is, or where the answer is, or how the state's going to help going forward. Because again, I don't believe it should be put on the local taxpayers. The situation wasn't created by the local taxpayers.
What is your message to the Brick Schools community, the staffers, the teachers, parents, students, especially the parents of younger kids who are in the elementary school level or maybe going into middle school, who have still a long future in the Brick school system before maybe they go off to college or into a career, on what the future looks like.
I think the message is to continue to support Brick schools and stay united. It never helps to have infighting between the town members. We want them to stay united and be behind the schools. We're doing the best we can. Our teachers are doing the best that they can to educate the children, and we always have the children in mind.
But, the worst thing that can happen is to start fighting amongst each other within the community. When people start picking sides within, that sports are more important than AP classes or vice, that's not.
Right.
We're not a high spending district, so we shouldn't have to fight over what things we're spending money on that are more important, because we're not spending money on things that other districts throughout the state are spending money on. Like, there's other districts within the state that are above adequacy. That's the one thing that of the districts that got money last year because of S2, there are many of them that got more state aid that are spending above adequacy. So they're above adequacy and getting more state aid. Again, from a logical perspective, how does that make sense? How are districts who are below adequacy not getting more state aid? There should be some type of an adjustment, and we've talked about this with Senator Sweeney when we met with them, that before they distribute the state aid, once they determine how much a district is spending, or should be spending, I should say, and what their wealth calculation is, before that gets distributed, they should be looking at where that district is in comparison to adequacy in their actual spending. And if they're above adequacy, there should be some type of adjustment that doesn't award them for doing that, doesn't award them for being a high-spending district. There was a report just recently released that shows that some districts are spending in excess of $40,000 a student and getting more money from the state to do so. There's something inherently wrong with that. Something wrong with that.
Thank you for your time, Superintendent Cranston.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
That's Brick Township Schools Business Administrator James Edwards and Acting Superintendent Sean Cranston, as Brick Schools continues a search for answers and funding like so many others across the state. In the newsroom, I'm Vin Ebenu.